You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona. With me always are my good friends.
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And
Shannon G and Mesa AZ.
There you
excellent.
go.
We're glad to have everybody here with us at looking out for the podcast. We last left off with our heroes going out to Maiden the Dolphin. Jay and Jim were headed out after the arrival of the new aircraft. And yeah, so Jay's here to tell us all about how it went, since we kind of lost a little time. We were short on time last time. But
Right. Well, hey, so, as everybody remembers, unfortunately, Jim had lost this airplane called the Dolphin. And, it had, well, I won't say it had an early demise. He had the aircraft for some time, had never crashed it or whatever until, we started flying it. And, and once he started letting us fly it, then it met its untimely demise. And unfortunately, Jim, being a guy who was excellent at repairs, he couldn't recover it from this last repair. It just had been smashed to dust. And, the atoms were just so discombobulated that he couldn't put everything back together. So he decided, well, I'll just either get a different plane to use with this gas motor, right? Because that was the whole thing. It was the second plane that he had converted over to a gas motor or engine. So it was one of those things. Oh, well, I remember seeing the kit because we were looking for the kit. We'll just get it. And it was like all of a sudden the world supply had just run out. There was you couldn't find this plane. And luckily you had I guess it was maybe a week later or so, you came back in and sent me you found something on eBay and we're like, yeah, what are you talking about? Here, here's that plane right here. Is this the one you're talking about? I'm like, holy crap, you're right. So I sent it on to Jim, and then Jim, called the guy up and got one of the models and bought it, and supposedly it was on its way. But what had happened, it wasn't a guy on the internet. It turned out it was actually a company, supposedly, that we had tried before to get it from, and Jim was like, "Oh yeah, they have to have a store on eBay, and then you can order things through them." And supposedly there was only 6 or 7 left, or they had sold some already. And I don't know, there's some confusion. But anyway, the thing showed up at his house. He'd gotten it, and then he put it together in a day or two. Then he wrote me and was like, "Hey man, come on, let's go out and go. Let's maiden this Dolphin." So I came out that day, and I was all excited because once again we were maiden a new plane, and so I was wondering what he put in it and everything. So that morning we got out there a little earlier, so it was a stiller morning. We prepped the plane to get ready to go. So I once again learning about these gas motors or engines. So I had fueled it up, had it all ready to go. Jim was trying to start it, and all of a sudden it seemed like we were back in Nitro Town again. That engine wouldn't start. It was like it had dropped 10 degrees, and that engine just wouldn't start. And normally, that thing would start within, quite literally within 5 cranks. Either you're sucking your fuel in, you could hear it with the fuel coming in, and then it would pop, and then the next turn it would start. And this thing would not start. It wasn't doing anything. We were sitting there scratching our heads. I could see the fuel going in, standing above it and behind it. I could see the fuel going through the lines, and we're like, okay, the fuel's, getting drawn into the engine. What's the deal? He was like, yeah, I was playing with it the other day, and, it started or whatever. So I know it's working. And we just tried everything. We, took the spark plug out. We kind of cleaned the spark plug. We, put it back in. We jiggle some wires. We're doing a little dance, everything but lighting fires and stick it inside of it. we just couldn't. Yeah, we couldn't get this thing to pop. We couldn't. Well, it did pop once. It kind of half popped, and that I learned that the motor has to be in the right compression phase. And so he's like, oh, it may be that I had taken off the propeller and I had moved this, whoozy watts it out of the way, and I might have 180 degrees out. Therefore, it's not, the timing's off. That's it. Like, not like a timing belt, but there's a little sensor on the side that goes to a little magnet that swings around it, and that's what tells it when to fire. And you're, depending on how you have it turned, it may be off. And if, that's off, then you're actually fighting yourself to start it. So we turned that out 100 degrees, 180 degrees, tried, that seemed to kind of help. That's when we kind of got it to pop, but it just wouldn't start. So Jim's like, oh, okay, well, it's just one of those things. I'll take it home and figure it out. So he disappears, and another, I don't know, week or so goes by, and then finally we get back together, and I come out, and I'm like, oh man, so what happened? What was it? What was preventing this thing from starting? And he goes, I said, was it that it was out of the 180, and then when we moved it out that 180, that made it worse? And he goes, well, no, actually we were doing the right thing, but there was another problem. And I was like, oh, there was? What was that? Everything, the battery was charged, to power it. And I don't get what could be the problem. And he goes, oh, it was the switch. And I go, okay, well, we had moved that switch several times, what's the problem? And he goes, no, it was the switch. He goes, it was a cheap Chinese switch, and the switch was bad. It didn't matter what position you were putting it in; it was just open the whole time. And but it was open, and so it doesn't matter how much we turn it or do whatever.
It was never firing.
It was never firing, but it was that 180 degree thing was also a problem. On top of that,
Gotcha.
So it was just one of those things that, it was the switch. We, he had replaced the switch. We got out there, like within 2 or 3, cranks of the propeller, it was popping and it fired right up. And, so he was afraid we were going to have to retune it and do some other stuff, but it popped right up just like always and was just purring like a kitten. And I was like, oh man, this is awesome. So, we were like, okay, we're ready to try this thing finally. So, like I said, we got out there, and he had another problem that we had with that particular plane was that we had a Lemon receiver, which has a gyro in it, and so it was one of their new ones. It comes in either a 7-channel or a 10-channel. So he had a little 7-channel model, and the time before, he had gotten some interference, and then we were trying to figure out, what was up with the interference. Now, later on, as I've been doing research and been finding out with once again, no problem when you're doing a nitro motor per se of getting interference from the little CDI unit. And I don't remember what CDI stands for, but it's basically a little ignition box that sends out the spark that goes to the spark plug. Well, that thing's loud, noise wise, and it's making lots of noise. Now we're on 2.4. Back when we had like 7.2 hertz, on the radios, that used to just cause havoc with those. But 2.4 is less susceptible to it, but it's still susceptible. And as I've been learning, depending on how you have your plane grounded or how your battery system works, like, so Jim has 2 switches. One switch powers the radio and another switch that powers the CDI, but it only has one battery. Okay. And normally when you do these things, you have 2 batteries, one that powers the radio and one that powers the CDI. And so he has it set up where he has one battery that powers both the radio and the CDI. Well, as far as I understand it, you can get noise that comes back, goes through the battery, jumps through the circuitry that goes back into your radio, sending all sorts of havoc through there, and can cause you problems.
Yep,
so
that's true.
And on top of that little CDI box, depending on how close that you have it inside the cockpit, like where it's at in the cockpit, compared to where the actual receiver is, it has to have a little bit of separation. And so, you got to make sure you have those things separated and all that kind of stuff. But Jim had moved. I think, they were at opposite ends, and this time it wasn't giving him the, any kind of stray signals or anything. Oh, and I also found out that if you use a metal rod from your throttle servo, and it goes in to where your engine is, I guess it can come back along that metal rod, that your push rod that you have, feedback through that servo and cause you all sorts of havoc too as well. But anyway, we weren't having that problem. It's just one of those things that happened from prior to that. But anyway, we didn't have any of those problems. I took the plane up and didn't have any problems. I mean, the plane took off. It flew around. Jim was a little hesitant. That was the other problem we were had. This plane, compared to his old Dolphin, seemed like it was way tail heavier than the other one. I mean, when you picked up the plane, just basically just to give it a little CG test, you could just feel just how tail heavy the plane was. And I looked at him and I said, "Whoa, this, it's the exact same plane. Why is this newer model way tail heavier than the old one? It's not like they, balsa wood got lighter in like 10 or 15 years or 20 years from those two kits." And he goes, "Oh,
Right.
well, it's real easy. They, from the, in the rear of the fuselage, they had stringers in the back, where in this one, they actually have the sheeting that goes the whole length of the tail. So, now the tail's stronger because it's sheeted all the way back.
Right.
But now you have that extra weight of that sheeting." And I'm like, "Really? Balsa sheeting is that much heavier?" And he goes, "Yeah, you don't realize it, but it does add up since it's going all along the tail, and it doesn't have that to lighten it up." So that was another thing I kind of learned, depending on how, they built it and everything. But being that it was a gas engine and gas engines are heavier, it wasn't that bad, but he had to strap a couple of batteries to the front of the plane to kind of help balance it. And as we learned later on, we were able to take some of those batteries out and the plane still flew fine. But, for the first flight, I was like, okay, the plane feels a little heavier. I'll fly it and see what happens. But like I said, lo and behold, even with those heavier batteries in there, I mean, the plane flew very similar to the first model. I guess you could feel it being nose heavy, a little sluggish. And I was like, well, I think we can take one of the batteries out. So we ended up taking one of the batteries out. The plane balanced fine. It balanced okay. But it definitely felt lighter, and the plane, landed a little bit better. It didn't land as fast. So we were able to slow the plane down, because the first flight, it seemed like it was really, remember before when we were flying, I was like, oh man, we got to, it was just chugging along because the idle was too fast. Well, we had chugged back on the idle quite a bit, but it was still zipping by when it came in, and so we're thinking it might be due to the nose weight. Anyway,
Those
took that out.
going downhill.
Afterwards, like I said, took that weight out of there, and then the plane slowed down. The plane flew fine, and like I said, it was a good success, and a lot was learned. Like I said, as for things for having to look out for interference, once again, your CG, and just things in general with those type of engines. Now, I've also learned that there's a CDI tester, it's a CDI tester. And if we would have had one of these little meters, you just plug your CDI, the sparking part, that goes on the spark plug into the little testing meter, run it, and then we would have saw that, that it wasn't sparking, that we definitely had an electrical problem, and we would have helped us out. But neither one of us had a CDI meter. I just learned about this device just recently, just kind of looking around when I was doing all this research for the other stuff, that they're out there, but I could definitely see having that device to help. So
I've got like 4 right here. You should have just asked.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're just not in the know there, Jay.
I guess so, man. What can I say?
They're at Walmart, Come on.
Yeah. Well, and I actually have the you were talking about the interference coming back through the servo. I actually have the servo tester that will actually show that the interference is there as well.
Really?
It'll show, you
On
you
the
hook
tester?
it up and it shows. Yeah. Well, it doesn't show it doesn't have like what do you call that?
Sine wave or something?
Oscilloscope.
I just figured like a light
oscilloscope.
comes on or something.
No, it just shows the voltages. And so when you go to exercise it, it'll spike in voltage and it'll tell you, oh, there's interference here, or you get less voltage. So it just kind of shows you what all of them are. Because as the servo is pulling, the servo has a rated voltage that it exercises in.
Right.
And then and it should only be like 2 milliamps or something like that. And then when you get one and it spikes to like 10, you know that there's a bigger draw on it or something's interfering with it. So, but you can plug it in and check that out as well. Yeah, those are little tricks of the trade. I mean, it's one of those things switching over to a gas motor that, I guess, I kind of lucked out because I switched over a year or two ago, so it made a lot more sense. And we didn't really talk when you were going to the Maiden because I was out of town doing work, but I'm glad you figured it all out. It seemed to have worked. Now, did Jim get to fly it?
Yeah, I maidened it, and then we flew. I think we flew 2 times that day. So I think the second time around, then he got to go on the sticks and everything. So he flew it around, and then I ended up landing it.
Did you did you use the same receiver that we were flying, or did he get a new one?
That's a good question. I don't remember what he had bought a couple of them, so I don't remember if it was the exact same one or not. Mm-hmm. But it might have been the same one.
Well, because you and I tested it in the little airplane. Yeah.
Right, and it worked fine.
Yeah.
So, but cool. We weren't having any problems with it whatsoever the second time around. Like I said, he had a little bit of separation, and had gotten whatever he. Oh, one of the problems, I don't know. He had also damaged, or not Jim per se, but one of the antenna wires had gotten damaged. It had gotten bent, and so it might have got frayed. And he had replaced that wire as well. He had an extra one. He replaced it, so that might have helped as well. So this issue is a multi troubleshooting type situation. Yeah, basket. So it might have been just a whole array of things that happened all at once. And that's typically how most accidents happen, right? It's not just one thing, it's several things, and they all come together at once. So
comedy of errors.
I did learn a couple of things. So remember when I called you one day and I was asking you about like, hey, so how many batteries should you have? Or, hey, what's an and you said, oh, you need to have an IBEC. And I'm like, what's an IBEC? Yeah. And I'm like, what's an IBEC? And you're like, oh, it's this ignition thing, and it's got filters on it. And I'm like, what? Why would I need that? Now I understand why you'd use it.
Correct. Yeah, because you can cut it off on your radio. You don't have to wait for it to run out of gas.
Right. But that's not the now that I've saw what happened to Jim and his setup. Now I understand why you'd want to have an IBEC. And the reason is because it has a series of filters so that you can run one battery through both systems. Because I was talking to Barcelou about this, that on that day, and he was like, "Well, where was it grounded to?" And da 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 da. And I go, "Well, it's a floating ground, because it's not grounded to something. There's
how do you ground an RC airplane,
right? It's floating, And he's like, "Oh, that's right. It is floating, and therefore, so he goes, and if it's not a a strong common ground, you may have these problems if that thing's sparking every time and sending that signal out." And I'm like, "Oh, that's what that IBC kept saying. Hey, it has dual filters or quadruple filters to filter out things like that." And I'm like, well, now it makes perfect sense if you have one battery and you have, you're sending it throughout the circuit, and you have the thing that's sparking going through the whole circuit as well. Hence, it may not be on the line with the switch. His little switches were kind of isolated from each other, but they're still feeding back into the battery, and they're still kind of connected. So, yeah, if you had that IBEC between, that one thing even though, with those other two switches, filtering out that kind of stuff, that would greatly help. So now I'm like, now it makes perfect sense why you'd want to have an IBC, spend the extra cost to have an IBC to save the weight of a second battery and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm just learning this stuff, like I said, with motors.
I thought we got one for you for your gas airplane, didn't we?
No.
Didn't you order one?
I was thinking about it, and then as like with most things happening with little small electronics, they're drying up and they're out now. Getting an IBC is like trying to get an Antonium. They're just kind of
everybody's
they're all out of stock, and until China can find that mine with more lead in it, I don't know, so they can build more.
Yeah, they need to hire more kids.
Yeah, they need more. They need more children.
That's crazy. Well, that's good that he got to fly. It's like version 2 with the new sheeting on the bottom and everything. I think Jim had the original one, so it was probably version 1, and they probably busted a couple of tail wheels off of it, so they sheeted the back part to make it a little stronger.
Yeah.
I'm glad they had it in stock, though.
Yeah, he went through the whole plane, and he said that they did make some improvements, but where they had put some reinforcements where they, he had added it to his plane. He goes, they have already, it was like somebody looked at his plane and said, oh yeah, we're going to take these things and add these points of strength to strengthen here near the gear, and strengthen here near the firewall and all this kind of stuff. So he said, yeah, it was, in a way, it was better built, but you could feel, the weight difference between the two and where it was coming out. So
yeah. Well, that's good. If you put heavy batteries in there headed downhill, man, that thing's going to come screaming. Kind of like the Bison did when we made the Bison with those big batteries in there.
Heck yeah.
That thing was constantly screaming at the ground, up until it went to the tail, and then it was very exciting. So
Hey, just got to have something to counterbalance that whole thing. And you did a great job bringing it back, being tail heavy.
I think you were testing me, actually. That's too funny. Well, I'm glad that you guys got to maiden it. It sounded like it was a good day, and it went home in one piece and not in a garbage bag. I would have felt terrible if that would have happened, but
you and me both.
But he's excited about it, I think.
Oh yeah, well, just when you get something back from the dead, when it's a favorite plane of yours, and he was ecstatic that we got it flying and it worked well. And the only thing. What was the only thing we didn't actually do? Even though we flew, I think we still didn't turn on. That's what it was. I think we still didn't turn on the gyro. We never had the gyro on, or I can't remember if we actually were playing with the gyro or we did have it with the gyro on. I can't remember now. It's been so long. But anyway, we got it flying. That was the biggest thing, and. And I'm sure we'll be able to conquer it so that we'll have, we'll have, what's the word I'm looking for? We'll have confidence to turn the gyro on and get that all tuned out. But we got the plane flying just in plain Jane mode. And like I said, the research, I did, as for grounding the thing out or getting rid of that, the potential of those problems. I haven't had a chance to really talk to Jim about it, but, having a second battery or back in there.
Did he replace that switch? Did he actually have to buy a new one?
He got it. The package that he got came with like 3 switches.
Oh, gotcha. So he just
so it out. The first switch worked, the second switch didn't work, and then he had a third switch that worked. So it was that second switch that was bad.
Yeah,
and it's 3-pack, I guess. So.
Yeah, that sounds about right, because I think I have some of those and they came in a 3-pack as well. So
yeah, and 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So
yeah, no doubt.
Ain't bad. Yeah,
a third of the way there.
Yeah, but it was really frustrating because that motor worked so well, and then all of a sudden it was like, I swear it was like I said, it was something like his other nitros. It was just being temperamental, and we were like, man, we cannot get this thing started.
Yeah,
and we couldn't figure it out.
Frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially if you're hand flipping it, man, your arms get tight.
Oh no, he had a little starter.
Oh, well, there you go.
Because I was even like, well, gee whiz, I guess you can just hand flip this thing. Because I mean, it starts within you'd barely go bit, and it would bring right on up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, geez, I guess you don't even need to bring that thing.
Well,
Until it has a
probably
problem.
Safe. I was going to say until it has a problem, or until you're missing fingers. But that thing jumps back at you, because if it kicks back, actually the smaller airplanes won't do it as big as the 120 or the 210. That thing will kick back and just freaking tear your fingers clean off. So that's what the guys use the chicken stick for, man. They just
right.
So very cool. Well, did you? Was that the only airplane you guys got to fly? Did you bring anything out as well? Or?
Let's see. No, we had other planes out there, and in fact, that day. I also think we have a new guy that's been coming out with Jim to fly, and he came out. Well, yeah, that's right, because he came out this day to see Jim's plane be resurrected, fly again, and like I said, unfortunately, he didn't get to see it because we couldn't get it started. But I had brought out, or Jim had brought out like a Cubs style plane, and so I was doing some training with him on that, and so we flew that. What else? I think Jim finally got his little Panther jet up. Was calm enough to get that out, because he wanted to show Jonathan that fly. Right. And the thing is, I mean, it's a cool little jet. The only problem is, I mean, you have any wind, that thing is so small and so twitchy. It's like getting thrown all about the sky, man. It's just getting blown around. And I'm like, we should fly that the minute you get there, we should be flying it, Yeah. Jim's like, hey, I want to fly the Panther. I'm like, Jim, it's, the winds are, they're gusting from 5 to 25. I don't think so. Right. Oh yeah, no, you'll be able to do it. And I go, yes, yes, no, I don't know.
Right.
Well, why don't we do it when it's calm out? We can fly
the winds. I want to do it when it's a 30-knot crosswind.
Yeah, the wings are fine for doing 30-knot crosswinds, winds, but that little jet just is not a windy plane contender. So
yeah,
but
it's only like 65 millimeters or something like that.
Yeah, it's just it's either 64 or it's not 70. It's a small. It's like 64 or 50. I mean, it's a small, small little guy.
I think Shannon has one that's small.
I got plenty of those.
I can't remember. You got like a Corsair or something that size, right?
Oh, I have the Free Wing Crusader.
Crusader, that's it.
And it flies okay. I love I wish they would make an 80 or 90, because I just love the Crusader. But I've got the Habu SS, the little 50 millimeter. That thing flies really nice. Like that's like my go-to, just if I want to go, and if it's a little windy, it's not that bad. Yeah. But I know he's talking about the Free Wing Panther. Is that what it is? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they get thrown around a little bit, and but I mean they fly.
Yeah,
actually,
they fly. It's just that
when it's
windy, they have such a small wing. It's not like it's a big broad wing or a delta wing. It's just a little itty bitty wing, and that little thing.
Well, it's got sails on the ends of it too, because it's got tip tanks, doesn't it?
It's got tip tanks, and
so it's all waggly,
and
it
no
doesn't have a rudder.
And no rudder. Yeah. So it's only
rudder.
a yank and bank only. So you have to be.
It needs a rudder.
Well, if you're cruising at a good speed, then you can yank and bank very well, and it does okay. But if you slow down to make it make
you're
turns
waggling.
or you waggling or whatever, it's just the plane's not a high wind plane. That's some like wind, and other ones not so much. This is a not so much one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that was an awesome story. Thanks very much for filling us in. We were kind of wondering what was going on, but our next episode coming up is I think on a FRIA, because all of the FRIA stuff is coming up. I know we talked about on one of our last podcasts that Shannon had his that just got approved. I found out ours is still pending. I think at the last meeting they had, they said ours was hung up for some reason, so I don't think we've got ours quite just yet. But hopefully we'll have a special guest on, and he can help kind of walk us through that process, and we can talk a little bit more about the Freya and where it's coming from or what's happening with it. So yeah, join us in 2 weeks when we have that topic. But
and
for
remote
now,
ID, huh? Are we going to talk a little
remote
bit
ID
about
as
remote
well.
ID? Because
Yeah.
did you guys order yours
I
through
did.
Spectrum?
Yep, I did.
There you
Okay.
go. So I just got back into town, so I haven't done anything like that yet. So I
Slacker.
gotta get on the ball. I am a slacker. So, well, anyway, join us next time for all of those subjects. But for now, I'm Michael here in Arizona.
And I'm Jay from the hills of Texas.
And Shannon G from ACAZ signing off.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Let's fly.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.